Today's shiur begins on the second wide line of Daf Nun Dalet, if you like, 18 lines from the top. Before we begin the actual Gemara, we glance at the side. We have a topic heading, the Nosei, which reads, Almona mikabeles mezoinois minichse baila. A widow receives her sustenance, her food support, from her deceased husband's estate, calls machi misakeves milunose machmas kavoy baila, as long as she withholds from remarriage, resists remarriage out of a sense of honor to her deceased husband. So once that changes, so then we're suggesting that her mazonos payments will stop. In other words, her ability to draw from the estate, if she is no longer concerning herself with her deceased husband's memory, and then that is the motivation for her to remain a widow, then things change. Omar Rav Nachman, Omar Shmuel, we're reading in the Gemara, second wide line, Tovuha linosei v'nispaisa ein lo mazonos. If the widow was sought out by a new man, a second man to marry her, and she agrees to marrying him, we're not saying that he actually married her. He's seeking her out as a wife, and she agrees. Yes, I agree to marry you. Ein lo mazonos. She no longer draws mazonos from her husband's estate. Rashi says, "V'nispaisa sulo karinon be megar amusech." She's no longer dwelling in her widowhood. The Gemara infers from Shmuel, "Ha loi nispaisa yesh la mazonos." By the mere fact that are we to infer that if she didn't agree to the remarriage, to agree to the second marriage, that means she will continue to get mazonos? Are you saying then that she will always get mazonos until the point that she agrees to marry a second man? Rashi elaborates that even if her non-remarriage isn't because of her not having yet agreed to marry someone else. Let us say that a woman didn't remarry simply because the right man hasn't come along. As long as her non-remarriage is not a result simply out of honor to her original husband's memory, if that's not the reason, she doesn't get mazonos. It has nothing to do with her having agreed. In other words, her lack of mazonos isn't simply a function of her having to agree to marry a second man. If we look together at Rashi, Ha lo nispaisa yesh la b'tmiha v'afilu ein ha'akava machmas kvoid baila ela shelo haya tov'a hagun la. Let us continue now in the Gemara. Omar Rav Onon l'didiv v'shulminei demar Shmuel. The following was explained to me by Shmuel. Shmuel, by the way, was the name we underlined 2 lines above, so here we're seeking a clarification in Shmuel's position. Omra, if she says, Machmas ploini bali, that I'm not remarrying because of my attachment, my dedication to the memory of my first husband, yesh lo mazonos. If that's her resistance, that's the reason, the basis of her resistance to remarriage, then she's entitled to mazonos. Machmas b'nei odom sheina mehuganim li law. If she says the reason I'm not remarrying because the right guy hasn't come along yet, ein law mazonos, then she doesn't receive mazonos anymore. She's basically saying that I want to remarry, just the right guy hasn't come along, so that her non-remarriage is not a function of her husband's memory. Therefore, no mazonos. Omar Rav Chisda, zinsa ein lo mazonos. Rav Chisda tells us that if a widow engaged in harlotry, she doesn't get mizonos. Omar Rav Yosef, kichla upirchasa ein lo mizonos. If the widow started to apply cosmetics, kichla upirchasa has to do with different facial cosmetics and hairdos. This reveals to us that her widowhood right now is not, her maintenance of her widowhood is not simply out of respect to her husband's memory. If she's adorning herself, it shows that she is basically trying to attract other men in marriage, so that she's a widow right now, but it's not a function of her honor to her deceased husband's memory. Man de Omar, we just had two opinions here, Rav Chisda and Rav Yosef, two situations whereby she wouldn't receive mizonos. What does each one say about the other one's situation? So Man de Omar Zinsa, if you hold that she doesn't get mizonos because she yielded to her evil inclination and engaged in an act of harlotry, and that's enough reason for her to stop receiving mizonos, kol shekain kichalo pirchasa, all the more so when she proactively does something that's not an act of simple yielding to some type of immediate inclination. So that is all the more reason for her to stop receiving mizonos. However, Rav Yosef, who said that's reason for her not to receive any more mizonos, but if she lost herself momentarily and engaged in an act of harlotry, she still does receive mizonos. My taimo. Why is that? Answer, Yetzer Anasah. She was overcome by her evil inclination. It's not a true life decision to get on with life and forget her husband's memory. However, the halacha does not follow that which we have heard till now. Rather, the halacha is based on Rav Yehuda's teaching in the name of Shmuel. Hatoivas Kesubos bebezdin ein lo mizonos. A woman who approaches the court and says, we're talking about a widow, approaches the court and says, I want my ksuba payment. At that point, no more mizonos. The Gemara asks, Velo, Vahatanya, is that so? Have we not learned the following? There are several cases, they're numbered off here, 1, 2, and 3. These are situations where she will not receive mizonos anymore. But a woman who simply desires receiving payment of her ksuba, we're going to infer she does get mizonos. So why would Rav Yehuda Shmuel say that? By her mere desire for ksuba collection, the ksuba is the basic. It's the money guarantee that a woman receives upon her marriage. In the event that she becomes a widow, she gets this, we'll say, this block of money. Why would Rav Yehuda say, in the name of Shmuel, that if she seeks that out, she loses her mizonos payments, her food payments, which is one of the Tanai Ksuba, when only in the following cases does she really lose her mizonos? So the Gemara asks, let's read it inside below, is that so that she doesn't get mizonos because of she's Teivas Kesubos based in Vatanya? Have we not learned Mochra Kesubos, Umishkina Kesubos, Osta Kesubos apotiki liacher, ein lo mizonos? You have 3 cases that are spelled out here. A woman who sold her ksuba, or she set up her ksuba as a mashkon, as a collateral for some loan that she took out. Or she made osta ksubos apotiki liacher, if there was land that had been earmarked for her to collect from it her ksuba, and she said regarding that piece of land, she said to a creditor that was trying to collect the loan from her, he said, listen, if I don't pay you cash, then collect that piece of land which is earmarked for my ksuba. Ein lo mizonos. If she did any of these things, So she loses her Mazonos collection rights. Hani in Avol Toivas Lo. These things, which are tantamount to Ksuba collection. It's we can say in general terms, it's as if she collected her Ksuba. Once a woman collects her Ksuba, albeit she's collecting it and then paying off her debts with it, but once she collects it, that's it. Then of course there's no more Mizonos payment. But just simply seeking out the receipt of the Ksuba, she indicates her desire to receive it in court. Is that reason for not to continue receiving Mizonos? So, reading the question again, we say, Hani, in these 3 points are reasons for her not to continue receiving Ksuba. Rashi calls it, is Lefishen Gibui Ksuba, that's collection of the Ksuba. But Taviyah, but seeking payment of her Ksuba, that's not reason for her to lose Mizonos. The Gemara answers, Hani, the 3 things that were enumerated, Bein Bebezdin, Bein Shelo Bebezdin, whether it's within the context of the court or even outside the court, she loses her Mizonos. Toivas, when it comes to the issue of her seeking payment of the Ksuba, Bebezdin in Shelo Bebezdin Lo, only if she seeks payment of the Ksuba in the court, then she loses Mizonos. But if it's outside the court, she indicates she's interested in receiving her Ksuba payment, but not within the court context, that's not reason for her to stop receiving the Mizonos. So we've made a distinction that in effect everything here is true, that these will cause her to lose her Mizonos payments, but in the case of Tevas Ksuba, that is true only if her Taviyah, her seeking payment, is only in court. V'kach hoyu anshe Yerushalayim. Now we have a little star, and this just to help us remember what we saw in the Mishnah. Until what point does she receive Mizonos? So in the Anshe Yerushalayim and Goliel, they had in their ksubas the following: Kol Yemei Meger Amalesech. By Anshe Yehuda, it was Ad Sheyirtzu Hayorshim Litein Loch Ksubasech. According to the Yerushalayim Goliel approach, as long as she maintains her widowhood. And according to the Anshe Yehuda, it seems that the Yorshim, the heirs, are in the driver's seat until they decide to give her ksuba. So we have 2 disparate practices, that of the Yerushalayim Goliel people versus the Anshe Yehuda. On the side of the Gemara, on the other side, on the margin, we have the Nosei, the topic heading. It's on the left-hand margin. Machlokes Rav Shmuel Eich Lifsoik. We'll see an Amoreic controversy between Rav and Shmuel how to rule. Ka'anshe Yehuda Oy Goliel Benusuch HaKsuba. Rav is associated with the community of Bovel, and they go along with the Anshe Yehuda approach, which was until the Achi Yurtzu, until the Yorshim decide to give her the Ksuba. And Shmuel, who represents the Nahardo town in Bovel, the Nahardo community, he goes along with the Anshe Goliel, which leaves her, let's say, in the driver's seat as long as she maintains her widowhood. Now the Gemara. Itmar. Rav Omar Halacha Ka'anshe Yehuda, which was Achi Yurtzu HaYorshim. Ushmuel Omar Halacha Ka'anshe Goliel, which was Kol Yemei Megar Mulesech. Bovel V'chol Parvada Nohug Karav. The Bovel community and all its Parvada surrounding areas followed Rav, which was Achi Yurtzu HaYorshim. Nahardo V'chol Parvada, Nahardo and all its surrounding communities, Nohug Kishmuel, which was Kol Yemei Megar Mulesech. Hahi Bas Mechuzah. Now Mechuzah is a place which is associated with the areas surrounding Bovel. So there was a woman from Mechuzah, Dahavis Nesivil Nahardo. She was married to a Nahardoyan. Interesting to note is that the Bovel represented one approach, Achi Yurtzu Yorshim, and Nahardo represented another approach of Kol Yemei Megar Mulesech. So you have a woman from one area married to a Nahardoyan. Also, Lekamei Rav Nachman. The case came to Rav Nachman. Shama L'Kola, you heard the woman's voice. Debas Mechuza, apparently there's a difference in accent or some other audio means of identification, and he understood that she was from Mechuza. Mechuza is the from the area surrounding Bavel. Omar Lahu, so Rav Nachman said, Bavel v'chol parvada nohu karav. The practice in Bavel and its surrounding areas is like that of Rav, which we saw was she continues receiving mizonos until the Yorshim decide to pay her the ksuba. Omru lei, they told Rav Nachman, but she was married to a Nahardoyan, and the Nahardo practice was that she continues receiving mizonos as long as she remains in her state of widowhood. Omar Lahu Ihachis, Rav Nachman said, if that's the case, Nahardo b'chol parvada no k'Shmuel. Nahardo and its surrounding areas follow Shmuel. And as we saw above, Shmuel ruled like the Anshe Goler, which was Kol Yemei Megar Mulusech. That's the standard by which we judge how long she receives the mazonos. V'yad heicho Nahardo. Geographically speaking, how far does Nahardo extend? We spoke about Nahardo and its surrounding communities. How do you identify whether a place is associated with that area? Ad hecho de sagi cover the Nahardo. As far as this measure is used, the kav is a particular measure. Nahardo had a specific kind of measuring size, a measuring vessel called the kava de Nahardo. So any place that they use the Nahardoyan kav as their measuring unit, that is called Nahardo. Before we go on, we have a topic heading: Machlokes Rav u'Shmuel im shomin begodeho shelo kechelik mitashlim Kesubos shel almona. When an almona comes to receive her ksuba payment, do we calculate toward that sum? If we take your basic ksuba for a woman who married as a virgin, it's 200 zuz. In calculating the amount she is to receive, do we calculate the value of the clothing upon her that she's wearing? This is a machlokes Rav and Shmuel. The Gemara, Itmar almona, when we pay her the ksuba, Rav Omar Shomin Mashela, we assess that which she is wearing as being part of the payment. Ushmuel Omar Ein Shomin Mashela, we do not assess that which she is wearing. Omar Rav Chia Bar Abba, the Chilufa Beloket, and the opposite is the case with a loket. A loket is a worker, and if we take a look at Rashi, toward the lower part of the narrow lines, Beloket, Sochir is a worker, Shegor, Beveis Balabayas, that lives in the house of the owner, the Lokach Lo Balabayas Begodim, and this worker received clothing that the owner purchased for him. Kishiyotzimi Menu, when the worker departs, Shom Osan Begodim Bischaro Lishmuel, according to Shmuel, those clothing will be subjected to an assessment as part of his, let's say, parting wages or severance pay. V'Rav Omar Ein Shama, they don't figure into the money owed to this departing worker. So according to Shmuel, who said by the almona we don't assess what she's wearing, the opposite is the case with the worker. So according to Shmuel, the clothing will be assessed, and the clothing that he's wearing that he received from the owner. And as far as Rav is concerned, who said by the almona we do evaluate that which she is wearing, in the case of the worker we do not evaluate. That is Rav Chia Bar Oven's approach. We continue with a second approach in the Gemara. Beis Rav Kahana Masni V'chein Beloket. Whatever was said regarding the almona, Rav said shamin, we do assess, it figures as part of the payment. So too Rav's opinion will be by the worker. And Shmuel, who said by the almona ein shamin, he'll say the same thing, by the worker. Umonach bo Rav simona, and there's in order to remember this, where a siman is a memory device. Yasma v'armalta sholach upok. The Yasma literally is an orphan, but it's a reference to the worker. It's like a man and a woman, the worker, and the almona. Armalta is the worker. Shlach is strip them of their clothing, so to speak, upok, and then they go out. Now, what does that mean? We strip them of their clothing. It means that the clothing are assessed. They're part of the evaluation. Omar Rav Nachman, Afal Gav Disnan b'Masnisin Kavosei de Shmuel. Even though there is a Mishnah source that appears like Shmuel, that the clothing are hers, meaning there's something that are her personal, viewed as her personal items, and therefore they're not part of an evaluation that we make toward the money she is owed. So even though there's a Mishnah that indicates the clothing are hers, Hilchos Kavosei de Rav, the halacha will follow Rav, who said that it's viewed as the husband's or the man's, and that she's simply wearing them, as I said, as a right that she has to wear them. But when it comes to evaluating money that the man owes, it's considered part of his payment to her. It's considered his possession. So what's the Mishnah that Rav Nachman was referring to? Disnan, we have a Tanaic source from a very, let's say, distant area. This has to do with people that make dedications to the Beis HaMikdash. Different types of dedications people make. One of them is called Erechin. Erechin is a Torah value that is assigned to people based on age and gender. Nothing to do with a person's market value, but rather it's a fixed value called Erechin. And let's read the source now. Echad hamakdish nechosav echad hamarachis atzmo. Whether you have someone that, let's say, he dedicates his property. It's makdish nechosav. Or marachis atzmo. That's a person who dedicates his Torah value. And the Beis HaMikdash has its financial emissaries, the treasurers that come to people who make dedications and expect payment. At times, people don't have the cash, so the gizbar, the treasurer, might come and take something as collateral. So when he comes to collect, Rashi talks about the gizbar comes lemashkino to take a collateral for his erech cash, the Torah cash amount that a person owes. So the source says ein lo, the gizbar who comes to collect from the person who made the erech dedication, ein lo, the gizbar has no right. Lo biksus ishto. Now this we dashed on because this is what's important for us. He doesn't have any right to seize upon her clothing, v'lo b'ksus bonov, nor his children's clothing, v'lo b'tzeva shetzova lishma, nor clothing even if they didn't actually wear them yet, but he dyed them for the sake of his wife or his children, v'lo b'sandolim chadoshim shelokach lishma, nor does the gizbar have a right to seize upon new shoes that he bought for them, that the father or husband bought for them. What do we see from here? We see a Tanaic source which indicates that the wife's clothing are hers. The husband may have made a dedication, but that doesn't give. He's him and she is she. And the gizbar doesn't have any right to touch her clothing. Amar le Rava Rav Nachman. Now Rava asks Rav Nachman the obvious question. Once we have a Tanaic source that backs up Shmuel's opinion that a woman's clothing are already hers from the outset, meaning that when an almona comes to collect her ksuba, we don't take the value of her clothing that she's wearing into consideration as part of the debt, as part of the payment of the husband to her. Those are hers already. So we have this Tanaic source would indicate that her clothing are hers already. Then why would you paskin? Why would you rule like Rav? Omar lei. So Rav Nachman answers, L'cha'ira kishmuel rahita ki ma'aynis ba hilchos kavasei derav. L'chora means at first glance, when you look at something, let's say superficially, just rushing through it. So you look at this source, it says the Gizbar doesn't have any right to take the man who made the dedication, the man's wife's clothing. So it sounds like the clothing belonged already to the woman. However, when you look into it, you'll find out that the halacha is like Rav. My taima, so what's the reason? Answer, Ki akni lo adaita lamekam kamei. When a person buys clothing for his wife, he buys it with the intent that she is remaining with him. So the wife wears the clothing that her husband purchased for her because she's going to be continuing with him. Adaita lamishka lamepak, with the intent that she's going to take the clothing and then walk out. Lo akni lo. He never intended that for her. So that to put matters simply, we could look at Rashi together. On the Rashi, we'll look at 3 lines from the bottom. In the middle of the line, there's a squiggle line. Avol himaynis ba. When you look into this matter, lo Messiah l'Shmuel, it doesn't support Shmuel. Daha kamei kaima v'eina yoitza mi beiso. In the source that you thought might have supported Shmuel is talking about a woman that was married to a man and that was staying married to him. She's not leaving his house in that Tanaic source. With that in mind, that the husband provided her with the clothing. It should be hers as long as she is under him, that she is with him. But if you have a situation where the woman is not with him anymore, it could be either he divorced her or he died, leaving her an almana. So you're no longer dealing with a woman who is with her husband. Hence, the clothing are figured as part of the husband's estate, or a figure as part of something that the husband can use to pay off his debt to the wife, the ksuba debt. Now, as we go on in the Gemara, we see a new geometric form, a volcano shape. We call this under the mivneh. The mivneh heading on the left-hand side of the Gemara, you see in the margin, that is, Sidro shel maisim shameshutef lahem revach v'chisachain avur hayasam. A series of incidents common to them has to do with profit or savings on behalf of the orphans or the heirs. Kalsa Debei Bar El Yoshiv, a daughter-in-law from the El Yoshiv family. Have ka tova ksubasa miasmi. She was seeking the ksuba from the Yisomim. Have komamti lehu lebeidina. She brought them to court. Amri Zila lon milsa de tezel hachi. They said that she looked disheveled, and it's not honorable to us that she should go this way. So this woman, this almana, who hears that she doesn't appear honorable. So Ozla levishtinu v'achsitinu lekule mona. She went home to her wardrobe and covered herself with all of her clothing. Now she's all dressed up. And also lekamei de Ravina. The case comes to Ravina. Omar lehu hilchasa kavosei de Rav. Well, the halacha follows Rav. The Omar almona shomin mashal leha. The almona, before she receives the ksuba payment, we evaluate as part of the ksuba payment that the value of that which she's wearing. So in this case, she's probably going to get, if she has an expensive wardrobe, she's going to probably get very little additional cash toward her ksuba. after all we figure as toward that payment, the value of that which she is wearing. Hahu di Omar lahu. There was a man who was deathly ill, called this a tzavoas shchiv meira, who announced Nedunya lebras. Rashi says Nedunya lebras ksuvim. Rashi at the bottom line ksuvim hoyu tachshite abonos kach v'kach levushim. There was an established fixed amount or fixed quantity of tachshim or jewelry that girls who would get married would wear, would receive toward their marriage. Fixed number of tachshitim. There is additional information on this, similar but additional on Amid Beis. If you look in the Tosfos Reed commentary, we're looking. Let's look at it together. The lower part of the narrow lines you'll see on the right hand side of the page in the smaller print. We have it marked off. Hahu Domer Nedunya Lebras Pirush Shchiv Meira Hoya. There was a man deathly ill. I'm reading from the Tosfos Reed on Nun Daled Amid Beis. There was a Shchiv Meira Hoya V'Tziva Sheyitnu Minachosov. He instructed that from his estate there should be given Nedunya Lebito, dowry for his daughter. V'Hayaksuvim Lem Big Day HaNedunya Kama Malbushim Kama Kishri Harosh. How many different types of clothing, how many different hair appurtenances. Now, the Gemara goes on, and the Gemara says, Zol Nedunya. That by the time payment came, payment means the purchase of those clothing and different cosmetic appurtenances. The market value went down. In other words, if they were worth $100 at the time that the father had spoken, and it was now worth $50 at the time that the girl that it was purchased for the girl. Omar Rav Idi Bar Oven Purna Liasmi. The savings, if you will, the profit, that extra, that $50 is theirs. So that even though the father said, get the various clothing and jewelry that was the quantity of whom was known and its value at that time was $100, we don't say that there is $100 earmarked for the girl and come what may she will get the $100, but rather she gets those items. Now, for better or for worse, which means that in this particular case, because their price went down, so the Yisomim benefit by the savings. However, if the price had gone up, they'd have to pay for that. They'd have to take from their estate and pay that increased amount, because what the girl is entitled to is the objective clothing and jewelry that was customarily given to a girl in marriage, not the market value. Continuing in the Gemara, Hahu Diomar Lahu. We continue at the top of Daf Nun Daled Amid Beis. Arba Mea Zuzi Min Chamra Lebras. Similar situation. A person is dedicating value to his daughter, and he says 400 zuz. That's an amount of money. From my wine, I'm dedicating to my daughter. Iker Chamra, the value of wine went up. Omar Rav Yosef, Revacha Liasmi. The profit is that of the Yisomim. In order to appreciate this, let us take a look at first the Rashi at the top. Arba Mea Zuzi Min Chamra. Mashma oise yayin yehe meshubed lekach. The mashmos, the implication here is that this man had a wine cellar, and the mashmos, the implication here is that he is setting up his wine cellar, his barrels of wine, as a guarantee for the 400 zuz. This father is not saying, give her the the actual wine itself as its value is at the day he's making his will. In other words, if just imagine, just to keep things very simple, he has 1 barrel of wine that when he is speaking is worth 400 zuz. And the father says, Arba mea zuzi min chamel labas. So, at the day that he makes the command, that he issues his will, that 1 barrel is worth 400 zuz, she would get the barrel. We're saying now, it's not exactly like that. He's not saying I'm giving her the barrel of wine. He's saying I'm giving her the value of the barrel of wine. And therefore, if that barrel of wine, when time comes to pay the girl, let's say a few months later, that barrel is now worth 800 zuz, all they'll do is they'll sell the barrel of wine and give her 400 zuz and profit the other 400 zuz. That's what Rav Yosef indicated. The Gemara continues. We have a Maisa. It's a long marking. On the side of the Gemara we have a topic heading. Atzas Rabbi Yochanan Lekrovov. Rabbi Yochanan will be giving a piece of advice to his relatives. Eich lishmor al nichsei mipnei almona shoysemar belechol. For Reish Lakish cholek. We have a situation of an almona that had a ravenous appetite. And she was she's a widow, drawing from their estate that they inherited from their father, i.e. her husband. And they were watching the value dwindle because of her excessive consumption of food. Rabbi Yochanan provides advice how to deal with that, and you'll see that Reish Lakish disagrees. The Gemara. Kreve de Rabbi Yochanan avalahu itas abba. The Kreve, the relatives of Rabbi Yochanan had itas abba. Itas is a wife of their father. So you have what level of relationship is not important here, but all we can say is that was a family related to Rabbi Yochanan, and they came with this complaint about their father's wife, i.e. widow. She was eating a lot, and as a result of her eating a lot, so their estate value was dwindling. Asul kame de Rabbi Yochanan. They came to Rabbi Yochanan with their problem. Omar lahu. So he says to them, Izilu v'amru le la'avuchon. I have to make a correction though. When this story took place, the father was still alive, but he was deathly ill. He tells the children, "Go tell your father." Izilu v'amru le la'avuchon dinyached lo aro lemezona. Rashi says on the 3rd line from the top, Dinyachid law b'tzavos shemera, through a will issued by an individual deathly ill, ubi edim, with witnesses, that a parcel of land should be earmarked. That's Niachid, is to isolate or earmark a piece of land. Ulai, Rashi goes on, Ulai tekabil alea, she might accept this arrangement. Even regarding not just the mezonos, which is a tanai ksuba, but the basic ksuba as well, we are taught as follows, that one who assigns all of his property to his sons, and he assigns to his wife even a small piece of land that she's to receive that as part of his estate distribution. Avda ksubasa, she loses any further ksuba claims. Let's now turn back to the Gemara. So you can see that Rabbi Yochanan is trying to help out these relatives of his that anticipate very little being left of whatever they'll inherit because of their father's wife's appetite. So Rabbi Yochanan says, tell your father that he should earmark a particular piece of land as from which she will receive her mezonos. And if she agrees, so then there you go. You've saved yourselves any continued heartache. Osu l'kamei de Reish Lakish. The case came to Reish Lakish. Omar lahu. Reish Lakish says if their father ends up doing this, he hasn't made matters better for the children. He's made matters worse. Kol shekain sheriba law mizonos. All the more so, he has increased her mizonos collection possibilities. Rashi says across from here, Kol shekain sheriba law mizonos. Imomar karka zu lemizonos seich. If he says this land is for your mizonos, ein ze elo im lo yitnu lech mizonos meruvachim elo mitzumtzamim tli karka zu ladofa. It's basically saying to her that if the orphans, if the heirs give you mizonos, but in very restrictive quantities, then behold, this land is there for any extras that you like. If you were to think that the land will be the source, the sole source of her mizonos collection, you are making a mistake. All of the estate is bound toward her mizonos. So now we continue in the Gemara. Just after hearing Reish Lakish's, we'll say, rejection of Rabbi Yochanan's solution, Amrulei, these Rabbi Yochanan relatives told Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan lo Amar Hachi. Rabbi Yochanan didn't say that. Omar lahu, so Reish Lakish says to them, Zilu havu la, you better go and give her the mizonos that she desires. V'ilo, and if you don't provide her with the mizonos she desires, mafikna lechu Rabbi Yochanan miunaychu, I will censure you. The literal translation is, I will take Rabbi Yochanan out of your ears. Sounds like some kind of magic trick, but it's an expression that you find in numerous places. It essentially means, if you don't listen to me, I will put you in cherem. Also, l'kamei to Rabbi Yochanan. Well, they went back to Rabbi Yochanan with this story about Reish Lakish, and Omar lahu, Rabbi Yochanan said to them, Ma eseh, what can I do for you? What can I do? Shekenegdi choluk alai. My equal, in other words, Rabbi Yochanan recognizes Reish Lakish as his equal, someone that has the authority to argue with me. So you have now someone that's arguing with me. I can't overrule him. Omar Rabbi Avo, l'div Rishon minei Rabbi Yochanan. It was explained to me by Rabbi Yochanan. Let's say a further clarification of this matter. Omar limizonos, if the husband / father would say to his wife who had this ravenous appetite, he said, if he would say to her that this piece of land is yours limizonos, riba la mizonos, the lamed would indicate that it's simply an addition to whatever mizonos she would be coming to collect. She could collect also from that land. Omar bimizonos, notice the bays is emphasized. If he would say that this land is for you bimizonos, kitzeitz law mizonos, then he is limiting the land as her mizonos collection source. As you can see, that's the conclusion of the 4th parak of Kesubos, and now we begin the Siyata Dishmaya, the 5th parak of Kesubos, parak Afalpi. The topic heading we have on the side, Nosei Klali Tosefes Kesuba. We'll be discussing in the general topic at hand has to do with that which is called the Tosefes, the additional value that's dedicated, that's written into a woman's ksuba. The basic value is 200 for a basula marriage and 100 for an almona getting remarried, and beyond that we call that tosefes, additional. The Mishnah, Afal Pish Amru basula goyvim masayim almona mona, even though we know those are the rates of the basic suba, if the husband should want to add even 100 mona, mona is 100 zuz. So you have 100 times 100 zuz. my arithmetic is correct, it would be 10,000 zuz. We know that the basic ksuba is 200 zuz. If he wants to add all that, he can do so. It's an expression. It doesn't mean we're not dealing with literally that amount or up to that amount. You can add more too. Nisar malone is garsha. Beimin or irisin beimin and asuin. If she becomes a widow or is divorced, whether from the irisin stage and certainly from the nisuin stage, the irisin being even if she becomes an almona or is divorced from the first stage of marriage, where she hasn't even consummated her marriage yet with him, with the marriage canopy, goiva es hakoil. The Tanna Kama says she's entitled to everything, including the toisefes ksuba. Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah Omer, he makes a distinction. Min anesuin goiva es hakol. If she becomes an almona or is divorced from after having consummated her marriage, then she collects everything. Min ha'erisin. If, however, she becomes an almona or a grushof at the erisin stage, besula geiva mosai v'almona mona, then all she is entitled to is the basic ksuba amount. Shelo kosav lo elo almanas lekoinsa. A man doesn't write over a tosefes other than with the anticipation of his konsa, of taking her in, of consummating the marriage and having intimacy with her, and therefore, if that stage is never reached, she's not entitled to the tosefes. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im rotza kaisev libesula shtasha mosayim. If he wants, meaning if there's an agreement between this husband and wife, that he'll write toward her a shtar, a document indicating 200 zuz. V'kaiseves is kabalti mimcha mona. She writes, or she indicates with the language of a receipt, that I received from you already 100. Or similarly, almona mona, he writes over to her the basic 100. V'kaiseves kabalti mimcha chamishim zuz. I've received from you 50 zuz, half payment already. So as far as Rabbi Yehuda is concerned, that is acceptable behavior. Rabbi Meir Omer kol apochis lebesula mimosayim l'amona mimona. Rabbi Meir appears to be much more restrictive, and that anyone who reduces the besula from 200 and the amona from 100, harezu bilas lus, that's considered an act of intimacy of a harlotrous nature. The Gemara opens up with a one-word question. Pshita, it's obvious if a man wants to add to the ksuba, he should be able to do so. The Gemara says, it's not so obvious. It's true that he's allowed to do that, but I need to be taught that. Ma'u detema kitsusa of the rabbanon. I might have thought that with regard to marriages, kitsusa means a fixed amount was established by the Rabbanon. When they spoke about the 100 for the almona and the 200 for the basula, that's a fixed amount without any increase option. Shelo levayesh es misheino, so as not to embarrass someone that doesn't have the means. It could very well be a very embarrassing situation that Mr. A is dedicating a vast amount toward his wife, and Mr. B, man of no means, doesn't have the means to do that, so he'll feel embarrassed. Chomash Malon, we said that, well, in all due respect to people's feelings, nevertheless, we do allow this option of a man adding to the basic ksuba amount. Im rotza lahoisif v'chulei rotza lichtoiv lo katani ela rotza lahoisif. The language of the Mishnah is im rotza lahoisif. It doesn't say im rotza lichtoiv lo. What does this, we'll say, nuance, this language difference, what nuance is communicated in this difference of language? So, when you say lahoisif, you're basically saying that the Tosefes, the addition, is viewed as an extension of the basic ksuba. So whatever laws apply to the basic ksuba will apply to the Tosefes as well. Had it said lichtov, it would sound as if there is a basic ksuba and then there's a separate type payment called Tosefes. And he writes It's like writing a separate new clause. But not so. Rotz Lahosef means that the Tosefes is not a brand new clause, but simply it's an extension of the basic Ksuba. Now, this point is Messiah Leila Rabbi Ivoi Omer Rabbi Yanai. This supports Rabbi Ivo's teaching. The Omer Rabbi Ivoi Omer Rabbi Yanai, Tanai Ksuba Keksuba Domi. The Ksuba clauses and conditions are like the basic Ksuba. Nafkamina, the practical application of this is far-reaching, and if you scan ahead in the Gemara, you'll notice there are numbers that reach 14 in total. That means there are 14 points of law that are affected by classifying, by describing the Tosefes as being an extension of the basic Suba, not a separate pledge toward his wife. In order to appreciate this Gemara, since we're learning Kesubos, this is the topic. If we would encounter this in another Masechta, I would very likely say, here's the list, and the details are in Maseches Kesubos. But here, and I wouldn't spend time elaborating on each one. But here we're learning the topic of Kesubos, therefore we have to explain each one. This is if not now, when. So let's go through the list. We say that the Tanai Ksuba Domi, Nafkamina lemoicheres, ulemoicheles, lemoiredes, lefogemes, and the list will go on. Let's take them one by one. In the meantime, mocheres. We take a look at the Rashi. You'll find Rashi a number of lines up from here. Lemoicheres ulemoicheles, a woman who sells or a woman who forgoes. Mocheres ksubasa ulemoicheles ksubasa. When a woman sells her ksuba or forgoes her ksuba, mochla umochra es ha-koil. The triangle that you see in the Rashi is an attempt to highlight in this case you have the word hakol, later on you'll see the word tosefes, it means the whole thing. And this marking scheme in the Rashi, we're going to continue down the Rashi on Nun Hey Omed Aleph as well. So it's to indicate that everything is included. When a woman either sells or forgoes her ksuba, she is doing so with regard to the entire ksuba. Lefisha kol kori ksuba. The whole thing is called ksuba. Rashi says, "V'lo amrinon," and we don't say lo mikri ksuba lamona mosayim, that only the basic 100 or 200 zuz is called the ksuba. Not so. The third example was moiredes. We go to Rashi. L'moiredes destam b'pirkin. It's taught later on in Daf Samach Gimel, Hamiredes al Baila, a woman who literally means rebels against her husband. Pochasin lo miksubaso. There's a process whereby every week she continues in this rebellious type behavior. We reduce her ksuba ad mosai hu poches ad keneged ksubasa. How much do we continue reducing until we insist on the couple getting divorced? Until it says ad keneged ksubasa. That's the expression. Lo temo keneged mona masayim lechudayu elo af hatoisefes pochasin v'holchen. We don't say that we reduce. There's a fixed rate of reduction that's spelled out there in the Gemara later on. We don't say that we reduce only till we finish 200 zuz, but we continue the reduction starting from the entire amount. The entire amount is subject to this process of reduction concerning the rebellious wife. The fourth case, lepoigemes. What is pogemes? So Rashi explains in the Perek HaKosev, later in the Masechta, in the Perek called HaKosev, Tanan HaPogemes, Ksubasa lo tifra lo b'shvua. A woman who is pogemes or ksuba, in order for her to collect the balance, she would have to swear. In pogma toisefes nami. This halach of pogemes, which we didn't explain yet, but it affects the toisefes as well. Sh'omra. Let us say she said, L'shein piron hatoisfois hiskabalti dinar. A woman had a ksuba of many thousands of dinar of value. Dinar is a type of coin, a very large ksuba. And she announced to us that I received 1 dinar of the extra amount, the amount above the basic 200 zuz. I received a dinar payment already. So, and she wants the rest of her ksuba. Af zu poigemes ksubosahi v'im toyen bailo his kabalt kol ksubosech. In a case like that, where she claims she received partial payment, even if that partial payment didn't touch upon the basic ksuba, it's only a partial payment coming off the top. If the husband says to her, you received all of your ksuba, in order for her to have a chance of getting what she anticipates getting, lo tifrela b'shvua, the fact that she said, I already received partial payment, even if that partial payment was from the tosefes amount of the ksuba, she still cannot collect the balance unless she swears. And the issue of the idea of swearing is something that we look at with very heavily in general, say, court procedure. People are not quick to taking shvuah, so it's a weighty matter. We continue in the Gemara, the number 5, toivas, number 6, uleveres aldas. What are these things? Rashi says, toivas. Shamru chachomim atoivas ksubasu bebesin eilo mezonos. We saw this in our shiur earlier today, that a woman who places a claim into receive her ksuba payment, that signifies the end of her receiving of mezonos. Tovas tosefes nami eilo mezonos. If she comes in desiring the tosefes part of her ksuba payment, that also signifies the end of her receiving of mezonos. Oiveres aldas, Rashi says, Berka Madir, later in the Mesichta, Shomru Alea Teitze Shelo B'Ksuba, a woman who leads a lifestyle which is characterized by violation of halacha. That's called Oiveres aldas. She violates halacha. There is quite a bit of detail to what is included in Oiveres aldas, but if she is like that, we say she leaves the marriage. She's divorced without receiving ksuba. She loses her ksuba rights. Lo temo ksubas monomasayim. Don't think that when we say she loses her ksuba rights, she loses only the basic ksuba. Ava tesefes maton bi'almuhu lo ifsida. But the tesefes is a gift, and she shouldn't lose that. Not so. In other words, don't say that, but rather she loses everything, including the tesefes. Just like she loses the basic ksuba, she loses the tesefes as well. We continue at the top of Daf Nun Hey Omer Aleph. Number 7, top line, first word, l'shevach, 8, l'shvua, 9, l'shvius. Let's take a look at Rashi on some of these things. L'shevach, shomru b'vchoros, ein ha-b'chor noto pishnayim b'shevach sheshivchu, sheshovchu anechosim lachar misas aviyem. V'lo isha b'ksubasa. The halacha says that though a b'chor, a firstborn, he receives twice as much as any one other brother in the inheritance of the estate, the Bechor does not get any extra, any amount above and beyond his other brothers with regard to any increase in value of increase or any from profits experienced after the death of their father. So that if you have, let us say, fields that continue producing produce after the death of their father, when that is distributed, the Bechor gets from that extra stuff that grew after their father's death, or any, let's say, market increase in value, he gets an equal amount. And along with that, we're taught lo isha b'ksubasa, v'toisefes nami lo gavya misheva sheshavchu nechosim lachar misas maila. We know that a man's property is ultimately the source of collection of the woman's ksuba, but she's entitled to collect her ksuba and the tosefes only from properties, from, property values that existed, that existed after the death of their father. So that if you have, let us say, fields that continue producing produce after the death of their father, when that is distributed, the Bechor gets from that extra stuff that grew after their father's death, or any, let's say, market increase in value, he gets an equal amount. And along with that, we're taught lo isha b'ksubasa, v'toisefes nami lo gavya misheva sheshavchu nechosim lachar misas maila. We know that a man's property is ultimately the source of collection of the woman's ksuba, but she's entitled to collect her ksuba and the tosefes only from properties, from at the point that her husband died. But any increase that took place after that, she has no right to collect from that. L'shivua. What does that mean? So Rashi says, L'chol mili d'shaycha l'shava ksuba. All matters that will generate an oath concerning ksuba collection, kagon, hanifras shelo b'fonav. A woman who wants to collect her ksuba and her husband is not present. That would obviously be in a case of a divorce where her husband is not present and she wants her ksuba paid. She have to swear to swear that she didn't receive any payment. Or one witness challenges a woman and says, your ksuba, you received payment already, and she, in order to collect payment, she have to swear, because that's the halacha that the Torah, that one witness is not sufficient for actual transfer of money, of possessions, but the fact that one witness is testifying and you counter him, in order to get your way, you'd have to swear against that which the single witness is testifying. A woman who is collecting from purchased properties or from the properties held by the orphans. In all of these cases, she has to swear. So too, regarding the additional amount, she'll have to swear in order to collect that. Now we continue in the list in the Gemara, number 10. What does that involve? So, we skipped number 9. We said Ulishvius. We read that in the Gemara, but Rashi explains Ulishvius she'ein shvius mishametes ksbo kishar shtoros elim kein pogma v'zokva ken amrina masachas gittin v'tesefes nami lo mishamed. As many of you probably know, with the passage of a sabbatical year, of a Shemitah year, according to Torah law, loans need not be paid back. In other words, loan debts are canceled by the passage of a Shemitah year. Let us say a man had died and a woman was waiting to collect her ksuba, and in the meantime a Shemitah year went by. Does that mean she can no longer collect her ksuba? Not so. She can still collect her ksuba. Not only the basic ksuba, but the tosefes as well. The number 10, is l'kaisev kol nechosav lebonav. Rashi, let's look at Rashi. L'kaisev nechosav lebonav, v'kosav lishto karka koldu. We made reference to this in our shiur today earlier. A man assigned his property to his children and assigned a parcel of land, even if it be a small parcel of land. Karka kolshu means very small, probably on a market basis worth less than her ksuba. But she received from the husband this karka kolshu of the ksubasa. With her receipt of that land, she loses her ksuba rights. She loses the tosefes as well. And as we saw before in Rashi, not to view the tosefes as some type of independent gift from him to her, but rather it's an extension of the ksuba itself. The ksuba meaning the basic mona mosayim that we've referred to. Continuing in the Gemara, number 11, second line from the top, ligvois min hakarka, 12, umin haziburis. What does this mean for us? So Rashi says, ein ksuba nigves ela min hakarka. When we speak about a woman coming to collect her ksuba, she collects it from land. When she collects from the estate, she doesn't collect from portables that the children inherited, but from land. And what quality land? Minaziburis means from, if there's several grades of land quality, from the ziburis, the poorest quality of land. And that applies not only to the basic mona masai, but to the tosefes as well. Continuing in the Gemara, list the number 13, 3 lines from the top, v'chol zman shi b'vei saviyah. And 14, uliksubas bonin dikrin. We look at Rashi. Kol zman she beis avia tanan ba'noisei in Perak Hanosei, toward the end of the Masechta. Kol zman she beis baila b'meshech al-menusa goivek Kesubos li'olam. As long as she remains in her deceased husband's house as a widow, she at any given point in time, it could be a long time, many years can go by. Her ksuba collection rights continue as long as she stays in the husband's house. Her rights to ksuba collection are open-ended. The if this almana goes back to her father's house, and the orphans were not serving her, they weren't supporting her, then the halacha says she collects the ksuba, but up till 25 years. There's an end time, a limit beyond which she can no longer collect her ksuba. If she remains quiet even one day beyond that 25-year mark, she basically forfeits her ksuba. And the main point in this discussion is to show how the same applies to the tosefes. And finally, Rashi continues, Kesubos bon dikrin keshem shenotlim dunya savi imam u'monam masayim kach notlim tosefes. The bon dikrin scenario, which we won't dwell on now. We've discussed it so extensively in our recent shiurim. But when we say that her children, her male children, are entitled to collect their mother's ksuba and not share it with children from another set of children from their father's other wives, the rights they have to their mother's ksuba is not just the basic ksuba, but to everything that had been written in, that she brought into the marriage and that their father had dedicated toward their mother's marriage. They collect, in other words, the rules of bon dikrin apply not only to the basic ksuba, but to the tosefes as well. As you can see, we've just completed the list of 14 items where we say that the tosefes is treated the same way we treat the basic ksuba. And all of this was derived from the fact that the Mishnah used the language imrotza lahoisif and didn't say imrotza lichtoiv.